Okay, hopefully you guys can hear me. I forgot to plug in my microphone. What the hell is wrong with me this morning? Probably because, I am feeling a little bit under the weather, but as you're in here, come in, say hi, say what's up. Um, I guess we can move that out the way right now. And I guess in landscape mode, it doesn't allow for the comments to appear in StreamYard, but nonetheless. Anyways, a couple things I want to talk about this morning. Also off key, but by the way, I am going live with BTech on the Deathlock podcast later on today. I believe that's 2:30 p.m. Central Time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 12:30 p.m. my time, and 1:30 p.m. No, same time as California. Yeah, we're same time as California. it's it's just one of those things. It's like, oh man. Oh man, today is just another Tuesday. Right, today's Tuesday? Yeah, today's Tuesday. My days are off. If you guys don't know, I am feeling a bit under the weather today. So I do apologize if I seem out of it or whatever. But what I want to talk about, in this live episode, I do want to talk about a report that I got back from somebody who does have the Nothing Phone 1 and got the Nothing OS 3.2 update, and they're having a green screen issue. Now, I'm not facing that issue, but we'll go more into that a little bit later. Also want to talk about the Nothing Phone 3 and a lot of people's reactions to it. And then, of course, Chrome OS and Android OS merger, as far as for Chromebooks and Pixelbook and Pixelbook Go, etc. So we're going to be talking about that in today's live stream video. I did go live a little bit earlier than expected. Right, it's like 10:40, so about 20 minutes ahead of the scheduled time. As you're coming in, feel free to say hi, hello, post in the chat. I'll kind of fix the camera here a little bit. There we go. And yeah, smash the like button. That does help out. It helps out quite a bit. So move the mic a little bit closer here. Hopefully that sounds better. Someone give me a mic check. Let me know in the comments if the audio sounds pretty decent. I would appreciate that. Okay, so one of the things I do want to talk about is this thing that's going on, this discussion about Chrome OS and Android OS as a merger, and to kind of just clear up some thoughts and concerns or whatever. To that extent, audio is great, awesome, man. Appreciate it. Glad to have you in here. Appreciate you for stopping by. So when it comes to the Google side of things, when it comes to mobile technology, right, compared to Apple, right, like Apple pretty much has like everything cohesively connected, right? You have the iPhone and iOS, you have the iPad, you have the MacBooks, and so when you kind of look at that, even though they do have different names now, right, you have like iOS for iPhones, iPad OS for iPad, right? Technically it is the same software. It's just given a different name just because of the fact of like what it's pertaining to, like what hardware it's pertaining to. And for the most part, it's cohesive, it's well connected, they play well together. This is why their ecosystem is pretty much like looked at as being like one of the top ecosystems out there to be a part of. And Google is kind of doing the same thing here with this move to just pretty much make Android for Chromebooks, right? So they're going to do away with Chrome OS, and the writing has been on the wall for a couple of years now. If you guys don't own a Chromebook, or if you don't own a Pixelbook, you may not have noticed it, but the introductions of being able to install Android apps on a Chromebook / Pixelbook, that's been a couple of years now. Like my Pixelbook Go, that came out in 2019. They're due for a new laptop if Google's ever going to make one. But I can install Android apps onto my Pixelbook. I can install Tubi TV. I can install Netflix. I can install the YouTube app directly instead of having to go through like, the, what do you call it? The browser, the Chrome browser, right? Because that's one of the reasons that Chromebooks have always kind of just been looked at of more of a meh type of thing. A lot of people want to use a laptop that's more powerful and has more capabilities. Of course, the Chromebook is basically a laptop that runs Chrome OS, and the default thing that it's centralized is the Chrome browser. But over time they started to introduce the Google Play Store installed on these Chromebooks and Pixelbooks, and then allowing people to install the Android apps. And of course, there is some mod developments that you can do on Chromebooks/Pixelbooks, right? You can enable the modding mode with Linux and be able to do different things with it, right? Like one of the most popular things done on a Pixelbook Go is installing Ubuntu onto the Pixelbook Go and running that, which is a little bit more of a software that's closely resembles Windows, to kind of give that a much more feature-packed experience with a Chromebook. But for the most part, for those people who don't mod their devices, you would take it out of the box and it's centrally cored around the Chrome browser. So with this move that Google's wanting to do with their Chromebooks, basically, for hindsight, is just allocating everything under one software, right? So I am very interested to see how this is going to go. And even though the Pixelbook Go is about 6 years old almost, to see if they bring this to the Pixelbook Go, and does it bring in a new sense of life, right? Because that's one of the things that we really like about these change up in software, is the fact that they bring a new life. They make the experience seem like as if you got like a fresh laptop just literally taken out and out of box, and for usage. So that's I mean, at least for me, being a geek, that's like my excitement on it, right? It's just to see. And if they are going to do this where it's basically just Android OS on a laptop, are we going to get the same, aesthetics, the treatments that we get with Android 16 and Material 3 Expressive? Is this something that's going to be on these laptops? That's, for the most part, one of the things that I am more interested in seeing. As well as, this how the form and functionality is going to work. I honestly feel like there's not going to be too much of like, a deviation from Chrome OS. Obviously, I think it'll still run, pretty much like how, the Pixel Tab runs, right? Just with this being something that has a keyboard. I mean, not all Chromebooks have touchscreens, but the ones that have touchscreens, obviously, it's going to feel like it. And plus too, I also want to know if this is going to make its way to the OG Pixelbook. So not the Pixel Slate, not the tablet laptop combo piece that came out before the Pixelbook, but the Pixelbook. I want to see if this is going to come to that. I mean, it would be so cool if it did, because the Pixelbook, unlike my Pixelbook Go, allows it to be folded into tablet mode. But it's, for me, it's always weird to run tablet mode on that thing, just because when I'm holding it, I can feel the keyboards behind, and I feel like if you grip the back of it, like too much, you can end up damaging the keyboard. I kind of wish that they had something that could have been like a cover to place over, so you're not touching the keyboard, but that's for a different video when I decide to do an updated review on the Pixelbook, which is coming soon. But yeah, it would just be very interesting to see if, like how all this is going to work out with Android OS basically being the operating system of Chromebooks, and Google kind of just uniting under one software, right? This pertaining into the fact that, there were so many talks and rumors about several different things, Project Fuchsia, which, we really haven't seen any, fruits of that labor, other than the fact that they brought Project Fuchsia to the Google Home Nest, the one with the touchscreen display, the little mini display with the webcam. That got, Fuchsia OS installed onto it, and then we've heard nothing of Fuchsia since, which is crazy. Don't mind me, I'm a little parched and I'm not feeling all that great today. So if I'm like blasé, that's kind of why. But I did take some NyQuil though. It's probably not a good idea because NyQuil will make me sleepy. Yeah, so I got my green tea right there for something of flavor. Mostly been drinking water. It is 64 ounces of water. I drink like 1.5 in a day. So yeah, don't mind me if I'm like reaching out for a drink or anything like that. But anyways, just to kind of wrap up this little segment right here, I would say it'd be pretty interesting to see what happens with all these different Chromebooks that's out there, including the Samsung ones. And that's also another question that raises too, because Samsung is kind of venturing away from Google, right? They're going to build their own AI. They're going to do their own thing, kind of like when they had stated that they wanted to develop and push Tizen further into the market, and they wanted to see if people would gravitate towards Tizen away from Android, because then they can step away from the Android operating system. Obviously, that didn't work out for Samsung. They didn't do it, but I do feel like that. I'm just curious to know like how their Chromebook built devices are gonna be, if they're gonna get this Android update as becoming Android OS completely on the laptop, or are they going to develop some sort of software for their laptops themselves and kind of move away from Chromebooks. So yeah, I'll keep you guys posted as more things develop regarding that story. But next on our list that I want to talk about is the Nothing OS 3.2 update. And this is just more of a call to people that have the phone. If you guys took the update, and when you guys took the software update, are you guys experiencing a green screen bug issue? The reason why I asked that is because I got a comment on the video when I shared, like what's going on with Nothing Phone 1 getting Nothing OS 3.2. Obviously, my device is not having a green screen issue. And I got a lot of notifications coming in because I just turned the phone back on and popped one of my data only sims in it, and so yeah, it's doing its thing. But yeah, I have not experienced the issues that one has commented to me about, and so I'm just wondering if other people are experiencing that same issue, as I continue to do a little bit more research to find if other people are experiencing the same issue. Like, I'm about to jump on Reddit later today and kind of go on there and see what people are posting, and also going on the X platform and seeing what people are posting there. The Nothing Phone 1 is obviously the first phone released by Nothing Technology after they, released, their earbuds, which they primarily started out as a tech company doing was audio, and then moving into the smartphone industry. So the Nothing Phone 1, I can see, why people are still using it. Other people kind of question that. I still use mine. I still like using mine. And, which moves into the next topic, which is, the feedback and backlash of the Nothing Phone 3 that a lot of people are talking about. Some like it, some don't. And usually that kind of like that is the way of it. You know what I mean? Like that is how it is when it comes to phones. You're either going to like it or you're not going to like it. And, and in this instant, it seems like majority on the YouTube platform are voicing their opinions that they don't like it. One of the controversial things is the camera setup on the back of the phone, right? How it's a little bit different, how it, like the telephoto periscope lens on the very top left corner isn't aligned with the main camera sensor, which sits below it. They're kind of like, that, right? Telephoto lens, main focal lens. They're not aligned and everything like that, and people are talking about it. That's one of the things that's being pointed out heavily about it. Like, for somebody that follows technology, I understand why those cameras are set up that way. Obviously, if you want to know more in detail from the mind master himself, Carl Pei, then subscribe to the Nothing channel, because he just dropped a video where he reacts to other tech reviewers on YouTube and how they reviewed the Nothing Phone 3. And, it gives us an insight into the mindset of the CEO, as well as what his engineer team were doing. So I understand why the telephoto lens isn't perfectly aligned with the main camera sensor. And that is obviously, to get, a much more, zoom effect that you can get with telephoto. They modified how the periscope telephoto lens setup is. If you don't know what a telescope, a periscope telephoto lens and how all that works out. Basically, they use bending with a mirror to be able to capture that. So the camera sensor actually sits inside the phone, and then there's a mirror in like the PVC pipe. There's a mirror that reflects the images from the outer lens cap. It reflects the image to the mirror, to the camera sensor, to get a broader zoom in effect. And because of that, that is that is why it sits a little bit different, is because they modified that a little bit more, so that way they could get a much deeper zoom than what they would have originally gotten. And they wanted to make the camera sit flush to to the body, rather than being slightly raised like on the Nothing Phone 3A Pro. So they saw and listened to what people said about the Nothing Phone 3A Pro, which that was one of the major complaints about that, was the fact that the camera setup, the camera space on the back was raised like a table. And some people felt like, it was making the phone too top heavy. So it would flip out of your hand and fall. So, I mean, there's some of the reasonings right there as to why Nothing decided that they were going to go ahead and they were going to modify the periscope telephoto lens on the Nothing Phone 3. And that's why it doesn't sit perfectly aligned with the main camera sensor on the back of it. Again, one of the things about Nothing is that there's options out there, and that's really what we want people to kind of focus on, because the reasoning that they went ahead and they came up with designs such as like this was the fact that they were trying to give options in the market where smartphones were starting to look the same. Samsung's, Motorola, iPhone, they were all kind of looking the same. They weren't identical as far as like the shape of the back of the phone. What up, B-Tech? They weren't doing nothing like that. But, for the most part, they were just, you look at the back of a Samsung phone, all the cameras were set to the left upper corner. You look at, the iPhone upper left corner. You look at Motorola upper left corner, right? Google Pixels kind of like went on a different way from that. Like, they had the 5A, which had the cameras in the upper left corner. And then, Google decided to just, go with the camera visor, to go with something like that. And even with like the Pixel 9A, which looks like that, is a little bit different than what we're getting with most smartphones today. But you look at something like a Samsung Galaxy, upper left corner. I mean, so yeah, Nothing Phone 1, upper left corner. So that they want to change things up and make things a little bit different. So there's options out there for people to kind of just like to go after, and that's the whole point of Nothing. And they're not trying to smash the market and completely grab all of Apple's shares, or if they wanted to grab all of Samsung's market shares. That's not what they're trying to do. What they're trying to do is just give people options and something different. Hello from India. Hi, welcome from India. So, and I think one of the things that I have this found respect for Carl Pei is, if you watch the video they just released today, which I did, if you watched it and you listen to how he's reacting to content creators' reviews over the Nothing Phone 3, one of the things that caught my attention, which earned my respect even more. I already respect Carl Pei, but just, the more and more that I see him pop on YouTube and kind of just like, help promote his own company, the more I'm just like, wow, this, if he really thinks this way, this is a great person to run a company. He said he himself was not too happy with the design of the Nothing Phone 3. That it had to grow on him as he used it, but at first glance, he wasn't too excited of it. Nothing Phone 3 is still overpriced. I mean, depending from your market to the US market, I would say I can see why in India's market that you guys are saying that, because that seems to be the overall consensus in India when it comes to Nothing Phone 3. Is a lot of people in India are saying that it's overpriced. For what you're getting, it's overpriced, right? Because there are other phones that you guys have in your market that we don't have here in the US, right? But like, for instance, those Huawei devices, those Poco devices, the Oppo devices, like those devices, they bring a different a different set of hardware at that price point, right? So I can see where you're saying that it's overpriced. You want maybe, you know, the actual Snapdragon 8, you know, Gen 1 or 8 Elite, you know, put into the Nothing Phone 3. As you know, you have Samsung that's even out there. I don't believe Samsung's there have the Qualcomm chip. I think they use their own Exynos chip internationally. But either way, you know, just for the things that Nothing Phone 3 is offering, I see that. I get why it's said to be overpriced. Here, you know, it launching here in the US at $799. I could also kind of see how some people would say it's overpriced for what you're getting for it. Because you can go with other phone options here, like, you know, the Google Pixel 9a is, you know, $499 at starting. You know what I mean? And I would say, you know, performance wise, it's slightly on par with that. I can also say, you know, that the Galaxy S25 base model is $799, and, you know, on black and white spec sheets, you know, it seems to outdo the Nothing Phone 3 on spec sheets, right? Everything really just comes down to user experience. I don't really rely on spec sheets to tell the tale of what type of experience I'm going to get. Samsung Ultras have the Qualcomm variants here. Non-Ultras generally come with... Oh, okay. Thanks for clearing that up. See, I would have never known that. So it's good to know. So the Ultra series in India has a Qualcomm chip base. It's only like the base model and the Plus model that would be Exynos out there. That's pretty good. But even then, I wonder what's going to happen with those in the future, because Samsung is rumored that they're going to shut down the Samsung Foundry. And they're gonna revamp the Exynos brand of processor chips, because they do admit and realize there's an issue with the Exynos chips, especially in their mid-range devices. Man, whew, you know, you get like an A53, A54, A55, or A56. You get the A30 series. You know, the Exynos chips in those are bad here, at least for the most part. So overall, with the Nothing Phone 3, the backlash that it's getting for a lot of the changes, right? The removal of the glyph lights, the introduction of the dot matrix display. You know, again, when you kind of look at the software, that's where I think a lot of the magic really happens when it comes to the Nothing Phone 3. And I can appreciate a company that really looks at the way that society is today, we as a people, right? You know, in different parts of the world, people live life differently. There's, you know, parts of the world where smartphones have not overtaken the day-to-day lives of everybody out there. Like, you know, here in the US, I can say smartphones has taken over people's lives here in the US. There are people that just cannot go long periods of time without being on their smartphones and getting trapped in doom scrolling TikTok or doom scrolling, you know, Instagram or any of those. So, you know, like we take our phone serious here, so I can see why people are a bit skeptic and, you know, kind of grading the Nothing Phone 3. However, I'm a firm believer that we can't really make a solid judgment on the phone unless we have held it in our hands and used it for more than 24 hours. I mean, use it for 7 days and do your daily normal tasks. So this is the reason why I can't give like a full in-depth thought of the Nothing Phone 3. I don't have it in hand. If I had it in hand, like if Nothing sent me the phone to review, well, first of all, I would do that review justice. And secondly, I would be able to then to tell you guys how all these things work. Like, people question the essential space. Why isn't the essential space something that's like, you know, Gemini AI or Chat GPT or any of those? And again, it's one of the core founding principles of Nothing technology, which is, you know, building you a smartphone that can get you through your day-to-day with all the things that you do on it, but it not being intrusive and invasive in your life, where your whole life is wrapped up looking at this display right here. This is the reason why that the user interface is the way that it is. It's not overly colorful. It's not flamboyant. It's not pop out at your face, because they're not trying to keep you on their products, on their stuff. The reason why that their smartwatch series is, to me, basic. Right? It's not doing too much as far as visuals, but I can tell you guys, though, the battery life on these things and what I'm able to do with them and the sport modes that they have is more than enough. And it's a fairly cheap price, $69 for this brand new. You can find the Nothing phone, the CMF Watch Pro 2. You can find that watch probably right now for like $50, $45 at best, brand new. You know, now that we're on the edge of the CMF Watch Pro 3 coming, there's already rumor talks about that. So I'm interested in that watch to seeing what's changed. I've got a little bit of some insight as to what we should expect, which is a slightly larger display on the CMF Watch Pro 3. Sorry, not 2, 3. So I think this was a 1.33 inch display. That one's gonna, or 1.32 or 1.3 inch 33 display. Like one of those two sizes. But anyways, the Watch Pro 3 is going to be at a 1.43 inch display. So a little bit bigger than this one. And it's touted to have 13 days of battery life rather than 11. This has 11, which I can tell you guys, it really does get 11 days of battery. On the 11th day, the 11th night is when I usually charge this back up. And it's supposed to have 150 sport modes as opposed to the 120. That could be different depending, but you know, if you're somebody who takes working out and health very seriously, more modes is a good thing. So the Watch Pro 3 is right around the corner, right? And you know, I can only support Nothing in the way that I have been, essentially, because I do want this brand to succeed. I do want them to, you know, eventually, you know, get up there alongside with Apple and Samsung and Pixels. I do understand, though, that when they get to that point in time, we'll start seeing price hikes on their devices. That's inevitable. That is something that's going to come with the territory. I don't think any company out there is going to be in the business of putting out one of the best spec products out there and selling it at a very low price. I mean, before we start flapping our gums about what the pricing should be of a phone, put yourself in the shoes and say that that was your company. Are you, knowing that you have all these overhead costs and all these things that you have to reinvest back into your business, are you going to sell a phone for dirt cheap? Because that's the thing that we forget. At the end of the day, all these companies are businesses and their intentions is to make money. Their intentions is not to build a solid phone, sell it to where they break even, where they have money built up to reinvest back into their company to design and build future products, and they take nothing home in pocket. You know what I mean? Their whole aspect is to make money. And so they want to be able to sell these phones. They want to be able to make some money. They want to be able to split that revenue with this much percent being reinvested back into the business and this much percent broken up amongst our workers that we take in our pockets. That's how business works. So we can always say, I would have sold it at this price. I would have sold it at that price. It doesn't mean that, you know, that's the way it should have been sold. Okay. If you want to know how this stuff works, like I said, Nothing is pretty transparent with a lot of the stuff. They asked MKBHD to give them feedback on what the perfect smartphone would have been for him. He listed everything that he wanted for what phone, what feature it was, what hardware it was. And at the end of the day, when they built his dream phone, the phone was so expensive for what he wanted. And so they don't in-house make these components, these hardwares, like the camera sensors, they don't make in-house. The processor chips, they don't make in-house. The battery, they don't make in-house. You know, the flex cables, they don't make in-house. Like all these things are stuff that they purchase and, you know, acquire wholesale in bulk from the actual manufacturing companies. And then they take those products and they start assembling a phone. Okay. In a way, kind of like, you know, the idea of like what Google's modular phone known as Project Aura was going to do. And I mean, that's pretty much what we have. It's just we won't have access to those hardware components. We won't get to, you know, just swap out a camera sensor for a better one when we want. I honestly feel like that if that smartphone had came, like, trust me, geeking out, I would have loved to see the Project Aura phone actually be a real, you know, usable smartphone today. But the reality of it is that smartphone sales would have taken a totally different turn if this was a thing that was solid and other companies started to adapt and try to, you know, create the same thing. Could you imagine having to go online and instead of ordering you just, the smartphone that you want and having it shipped to you, you had to go through a menu system and choose what type of board, what type of storage capacity, what type of RAM, and then what type of camera sensor, what type of processor chip, what type of, security chip, what type of, audio speakers, what type of buttons, size display, like all these things. If you were to literally pick all these pieces and then have it sent to you where you assembled the phone yourself. First of all, a lot of things can go wrong, especially if you don't know how to like prevent static electricity, which could actually damage the boards that are using this phone. So, and most people are not going to be able to follow those guidelines because there's some people who's going to be so excited to get a new phone that they're just going to rip everything out of the packaging and start plugging it together. And then when they try to power on their phone, the phone doesn't turn on, and they don't realize that they fried the motherboard because of static electricity, because of, they touched the board with their bare hands and everything like that, rather than using insulated gloves to protect the board from, from shock. Like, there's people that's going to do it. We can't, we can't expect everyone to just know how to avoid those types of things, So if modular phones came to be, if modular phones was a real thing, then modular phones would have actually made this whole market totally, it would have been totally confusing. And I know there's a lot of geeks like myself who would have been like, oh, that would have given us a job to do because we could have helped people pick out the right stuff they want for their phone. And it's like, true, we could. And we could also charge them an hourly rate to do that, But then there's going to be people out there who are dishonest, and they're going to be like, oh, yeah, you want to, that guy charges you $10 an hour to help you pick out the parts of your phone and assemble it. I charge $20 because I come with a premium Pro Plus, platinum package service to offer. And they're not really offering anything different than Joe Blow from down the street. So it would have totally changed the landscape of things. So I understand why they decided to kill the project, why Project R never came to be, and why no other company is trying to replicate and, resurrect that idea. I always felt like that nothing phone would eventually come to that point, but then I'm also scared too, right? Because with the launch of the CMF phone and the CMF Phone Pro 2, it almost seems modular. Almost, if you were just to hear a description of it through tongue. But once you see what people are talking about, then it's not a modular phone at all. It's a customizable phone to a degree. One thing I do like about the CMF Phone 2 Pro is the camera lenses you can attach. If you're someone who's heavy into smartphone photography, you can attach those things. And you can get, like better zoom in, or, maybe a fisheye, point of view when recording video. I think that's pretty cool. And, there was phone cases that did that. The Moment case was a phone case you can get for Pixels and I believe iPhone and I believe Samsung. And it came with these camera lens attachments that you would attach onto the case. And you can change, like the telephoto, the zoom, fisheye lens, all that other stuff. You would be able to do that with the phone case and the attachments. So how to what? If you want to clarify your question a little bit more, like how doesn't really tell me anything. So on that notion, when it comes down to it, nothing has a very slight different approach to the mobile tech space. And they're not trying to be the next Samsung or the next iPhone. Regardless of what people say about design only just tells part of the tale. The truth is what business decisions is nothing taking in releasing products, how they're releasing these products, what they're using to build these products. All these things make a play when it comes to nothing technology. And I for one am excited to see where it goes down the road. The same excitement that I had when Google first came on the scene, stepping away from the Nexus project, right, where they weren't going to use Samsung, LG, or Motorola to build the hardware. They were going to start building the hardware, and of course they developed the software. I was excited for Google Pixel Gen 1. I was excited for Google Pixels since then, which is why I have a pretty good size collection of Google Pixel phones. And the same excitement, the same level that Pixel had brought to me with, it coming out and, just it taking the market by storm. I feel that same excitement for nothing technology, which is why I've said so many times, I am open to nothing phones being the replacement if Google decided to send the Pixel phones to the killed by Google graveyard. If that ever happened, then nothing technology would be the one that I'm mostly invested in. And they're inching closer and closer to start having releases of their devices here in the United States, which is a very good thing. So like I said, right now I still use a Nothing Phone 1. I have no problem using this today as a daily driver device. And if I needed to upgrade immediately, it would be to the Nothing Phone 3A or the CMF Phone 2 Pro. Those are the two devices that I would upgrade to from the Nothing Phone 1. Unless I found a Nothing Phone 2 with, very decent battery life, then I would probably go for something of that, right? Will I get the Nothing Phone 3? Eventually, someday I will. As every phone that I have comes out of pocket. I get nothing sent to me from companies to review. So everything I got to pay out of pocket. So when I have the money to buy it, then I'll buy it. And then I'll unbox it, and show everybody, what it's about and show what I can do with it. So, but anyways, guys, I have reached the limitations of today's live stream. I'm kind of under the weather. I'm not feeling all that great. So this is about as much as I can push because I feel like I'm about to lose my voice again. And I do got to rest up a little bit because I am going live with Mike, B-Tech Review right here. Who got a haircut today. We are going live on the Deathlock podcast, talking about a lot that's happened in the last 48 hours, when it comes to professional wrestling. So if you're not subscribed to the Deathlock podcast channel, please go check it out. We're close to reaching our first 100 subscribers. I'm very excited for that. Other than that, that's pretty much it. You guys be cool and be safe out there. Again, smash the like button if you guys enjoyed today's podcast. Share it across various social platforms for other people to find it. But until then, I'll talk to you on the next one. And as always, Law.